I never needed anyone as much as when I needed you. I made a place for lonely hearts to find. It's where I wait for you. I'm gonna stay until the end has come and make my peace with you. Maybe this is just an old deceit. Maybe it's the truth.
Hello, everybody. We are live from Poznan. Welcome. My name is Enrico Vannucci, and I'm your host for today's panel called Let's Get Critical. Let's Get Critical is brought to you by Glasgow Short Film Festival and Short Waves Festival in Poznan. The panel is promoted in collaboration with Talking Shorts, an online film magazine dedicated to short films whose goal is to make shorts more visible and to create a wider discourse about the art form. This panel is also part of the Be Short Now initiative. The Be Short Now initiative aims to tackle and investigate distinctive topics peculiar of the short film industry and to share the knowledge with the largest audience possible, making this information available on internet for free in the form of video recordings and audio podcasts. The Be Short Now initiative is promoted by Talking Shorts and can be consulted at talkingshort.com. Today's panel aims to explore the current state of short film criticism in terms of accessibility and opportunities. In order to do so, we have invited three very distinguished guests who I'm going to present in alphabetical order. I'm very happy to welcome Marina Di Richter. She's a film critic and editor-in-chief of the online magazine Ubiquarian, and moreover, she's a film programmer for Neuchâtel International Fantastic Film Festival, and she's from Austria. Welcome, Marina.
Thank you.
Second is Julian Ross. You won't see him today because he's connecting by phone, but he's here with us. He's a curator and programmer for Locarno Film Festival and International Film Festival Rotterdam, and he is from the Netherlands. Welcome, Julian.
Thank you.
And finally, last but not least, Laura Valde, curator working for International Kurzfilmtage Winterthur and PhD student researching the short film ecosystem at the Zurich University, and she's from Switzerland. Welcome, Laura.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us, Enrico.
So we have a lot of questions today that we have prepared already, and so I want to start immediately. At the end of the session, if you want, the audience can write some questions, and then we can address those at the end of the talk. The talk will be more or less 1 hour. And so let's start immediately with a basic, simple question, which is, what is the main purpose of criticism? And in particular, I would like to know if you could address is it only goal to educate, or should it also stimulate the public to discover, or should it merely stimulate discourse? Marina, would you start with this?
Well, I think it's the combination of everything. It depends on which audience you target. Of course, you need something of academic, thoughts if you want to educate new generations of filmmakers or, writers as well. On the other hand, if you want to reach a wider audience, which doesn't come from the academic position, it doesn't come necessarily from this film business, then, you don't just educate, you are trying to raise curiosity and to attract a wider audience to go and discover new filmmakers and new films.
Julian, what's your take on this?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I think at this stage right now, short film criticism. Excuse me, that's the wind. The short film criticism as it exists at the moment is mainly advocation, and in hope that people discover short films that are mainly underrepresented in film viewing experiences today. But what I hope we can move into is short film criticism that engages in debate. I hope short film criticism just becomes part of film criticism and intervenes into the kind of larger ecosystem, let's say, of film criticism, and is discussed in tandem with feature films, mid-length films, etc. I see that done much more often in art writing, so art criticism. Short films are just treated as works, and in that way they're able to engage via discussions of themes or, stylistic decisions or ethical considerations, especially for documentaries, etc., alongside, feature films or even other artworks. And I would hope that short film criticism moves into that stage. Otherwise, I think it's just going to stay on its own island. And I mean, there are its advantages for that, especially for not so much criticism, I think, but for let's say festivals or programming, because I think the film experience of short film compilation programs is a very different thing to presenting a short film. But in the realm of criticism, I think it would be great for short films to be discussed alongside feature films in tandem for it to enter a new stage.
Okay, thank you so much. And Laura?
Yeah, thank you, Julian, for your comment just now. That kind of speaks for me as well. This is maybe just something that I'm hoping for, and maybe it's a slightly ideological or romantic notion of criticism. But what I would wish for from criticism is that it's kind of related to the specific historical, political, social conditions that we're experiencing, and that the criticism in itself is also kind of an art form in the sense of that it becomes a companion piece to the films that it discusses, so that it's not, I mean, we know kind of the sort of criticism that we used to read, at least in the newspapers. I mean, that's going down obviously as well now, where it's more criticism in the sense of I like this, I don't like that, go see this, don't go see that. So it's more like a shopping guide, and I don't think that this is the kind of criticism obviously that we're talking about, or that we are looking for short films. Also because the question of access to short films is, I think, something that we will come back to during the panel repeatedly, because especially for newer works, the question of accessibility is huge, because if you compare it to feature films that still do get a theatrical release, or at least go online quite soon, the discussion is obviously different in the sense of that you can really advise people in what's new out there and what they could go see. With short films, I feel the question of where are you actually going to see what the critics are writing about is fundamental, and we should always kind of keep that in mind when writing short film criticism as well. I think it's also one of the reasons why it's so difficult to write about short films also in the academic context, because it's so hard to actually access the films for the audience to actually see what critics are writing about.
Thank you, Laura. Actually, your answer drives me to a question that I've prepared already for later, but I would like now to address it right now since you raised it. And the question is, as the rise of streaming platforms over the past couple of years increased the quantity of writing about short films, and does more short film distribution equal better criticism? What do you think?
May I start?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't necessarily mean that the increased kind of streaming possibilities have also increased the number of short film reviews. I don't see that happening that much. There were some attempts, but not specifically like in the case of Talking Shorts, or in the case of Ubiquarian, that somebody actually dedicated their full time to actually write about short films. I'm not sure, if this is necessarily connected, but one thing is certain, with the increasing streaming possibilities that we're having everywhere right now, and with the possibility of the audience also of buying digital passes and whatever, you can actually recommend films, not in the sense as Laura addressed, or like this or like that, go shopping, but in the sense of, pay attention to this work for this particular reason. I think that the audience has a chance through this film criticism to go and purchase the passes, go and press that button, to actually make an effort and discover something new and see that.
Laura?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Marina that streaming platforms give us more access to these short films, and that then it becomes a vital task of criticism to actually pinpoint to highlights, because I mean, obviously the kind of danger with having so much more material online is that you then also get easily lost, right? And maybe not even start watching anything new because you're simply overwhelmed by all the material out there. I mean, I even we experience that. I think I'm always also happy when people actually tell me what they've discovered newly, and then I go specifically look for that. Still, I mean, I think it would be interesting to talk about ideas for kind of curated platforms specifically for short films, or what is already out there and what we could maybe expand on that, because it's still a little bit the case that discovering new material is mostly possible during a festival. Like right now, for example, we can all experience and enjoy the programming of Poznan or of Glasgow Short Film Festival. We can buy passes, but once the festivals is over, where or am I actually going to see that film?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're lucky, I don't know, if somewhere on internet, probably. Julian, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I agree with Laura in the sense that, I mean, if you think it's difficult to get attention for short films in the cinema, I think it's as difficult, if not much more difficult, to get the same kind of attention on the internet, where there's so much possibilities out there. But nevertheless, yeah, I do see an increase, at least visibility of short film online. For example, even on Netflix, you have a short film by David Lynch, forget what it's called, but one with the monkey. Because it's David Lynch, it gets reviewed in The Guardian, like a newspaper, despite its length. Yeah, I think it would be good for these platforms or critics themselves to push for more space of short film criticism, because it's not just David Lynch or Jonathan Glazer's small curiosities short films that should be getting the attention. And I look at platforms like Mubi, where short films are treated like feature films the same way. You get the same size still, same length synopsis, perhaps a write-up by somebody writing a notebook, a critic. And I see possibilities there. And, I think Mubi releases got more attention, at least in the UK, when they presented online releases. Those films started getting reviews, but not the short films. So I think it's time for critics themselves to pitch these short films as something they want to advocate and write about and discuss with a broader public. And I do want to say also, in terms of like curating platforms for short films, I see possibilities in places like Vidrome and the Cinema Club. I think both those platforms understand that perhaps the online experience of short film doesn't have to be a compilation program, but just one film, and have an interview with the maker or a write-up to engage with that one short film. I think Vidrome is bi-weekly, the Cinema Club is every week. I'm sure you have other examples in mind, but those are the ones that I regularly follow, where I feel there's, space for each work given to breathe. I totally understand the compilation program is a format that's necessary for a cinema screening, because it's hard to get people to buy a ticket for one, 20-minute film and then, oh, please leave the theater after the lights go on. That's, kind of difficult. But online doesn't have, sorry, it's very windy here. Online doesn't have that restriction. It's, so rather than presenting like multiple shorts per day for people to follow, I don't know about you, but I was overwhelmed in the beginning of the lockdown period in March when, I was trying to follow all these films that are going online for brief periods or, unknown periods, trying to catch up with everything. And it was quite overwhelming. But to have a kind of patient kind of programming for the online space, perhaps, short film criticism and discussion would grow, albeit slower, but in a more kind of expansive way.
Okay, thank you so much. I have another question now, the question is, who is short film criticism for? The audience, the filmmakers? What do you think? Julian, will you start?
Yeah, sure. I think right now, short film criticism is for the filmmaker, the writer, and the festival, and not so much the reader as much. And I think, as I've said before, it would be good to go past that stage of like sharing and this, suggesting to readers and getting them to engage with films that they've seen before. So discussing a feature film alongside a short film is one way of doing that, as I've said before. I understand at the moment. Saying that, I think, too much of short film and the determinants of its success is dependent on prizes that it's won or the festival run that it's had. And, I'm sorry to say, I think that's too limiting. It should involve critics' opinions and, broader discussion on the film as well, not just like X number of festivals it's been to or, prizes it's won, because in the end, we all know a prize is just, 3 people maybe happen to choose that one out of 20 titles or something. It shouldn't be so heavily weighted on jury decisions and also, the film festival runs. I mean, many films deserve these festival runs, but we all know that, this is dependent on, let's say, the visibility of its first or second premiere kind of spots and, its distributor doing a good job or, that kind of thing. It's not so, how do I put it? It shouldn't be the only way a short film is deemed successful. And I think one way of opening up a new avenue for that its criticism. You know, we all know feature films have like bombed in the box office or just wasn't really critically acclaimed, but one or two film critics praised it then or a few years later, and now it's become like a canon work. This possibility should also be available for short films. Yeah, so at the moment, I think it's mainly for the writer, the festival, independent filmmaker. Sorry, it's really storming out here. But I think we can move on to a criticism that's also for a broader discussion and engagement, and especially the readers. As Laura mentioned before as well, it's too often the case that the reader of a short film criticism piece has not seen the film yet. And this is also because of the emphasis on premieres for writers and outlets and things. So, you know, even if a writer picks up the short film competition at a festival and writes about it, if it's a premiere, that film is not going to be seen by basically all of those readers except those who are at that festival. So it'll be good to find new ways of visibility and accessibility for short films, so the readers can actually, you know, discuss themselves internally, at least when they're reading the piece. Is that the opinion I had when I watched this film or not?
Okay, thank you, Julian. Marina, who do you write for at Ubiquarian?
Well, you know, it started as some kind of personal wish to step away from the things that I've always written about. As like when you go to the big international film festivals, everybody's on about the main competition, about feature films or whatever. And at one point, I caught myself running away from those competitions and ended up watching shorts, which really made me much more relaxed and much more focused in so many levels. Because I noticed one thing, you know, one difference between these two ways of programming, like competitions, is that there was so much more attention put into the short films, and it was my very personal discovery that I just wanted to go and explore more of that, and not just stick to the same old, which becomes boring in a way. So what we're doing, the way we started, I mean, I initiated that, but it's actually three of us who are, you know, taking care of Ubiquarian, and now we have a huge team, was that I go to places that people usually do not explore, because there's some genre which are very kind of looked upon with high eyebrows. You know, it's like, oh, genre short films. So I started there, and then I started going more and more into the sidebars. So my interest was at the beginning a really small, unexplored sections of the short filmmaking. I mean, in terms of film criticism, and then I was expanding more and more. And now, literally, the only parameter in selecting what we're writing about is something that either made us very curious in a positive sense, or something that was really so bad it was like really interesting to look at. So we don't have the agenda, like what Julian addressed at one point. You know, we don't actually do the recap of who are the winners, and it's like doing the winner films. Just really seriously looking through the program, watching films very attentively, and then like handpicking what we think is in one or the other way interesting to be spoken about and written about. And then there is another, which is a column which is written by Tara Judah. It's bi-monthly reflections, which I really think it's very interesting as a concept. It's just literally reflecting on films you watch, not particularly writing about one single film, but making all the connections of what this film does to you, and where do you see its connections to the outside world. Maybe it's something you read about, maybe something you experienced, etc., etc.
Thank you. Laura?
Can I actually just ask a follow-up question to Marina?
Yeah, go on.
So interesting what you're saying, and because I don't know if Julian actually writes film criticism, because I mean you said it, Enrico. I come more from the academic context.
Yeah.
I'm not a film critic, really not. What I was wondering, do you actually think that because I realized how the first question was about film criticism per se, and now we're talking about short film criticism. So I was wondering, do you actually think that a critique of a short film or criticism has to be written differently? And if yes, because of accessibility, because you cannot presume any familiarity of the audience with the filmmaker, or because it's it doesn't have any commercial value, or is it actually the same? Doesn't it matter?
Well, literally, we're talking about the very, very, very a wide concept of film criticism. People who are reviewing feature films, it's let's say 75% of them will never reach the cinemas. If you go to the big festivals and you're doing the art house cinema or documentaries or whatever, so there are really small chances that these films are going to actually hit the cinemas in such a big way than huge commercial hits, such as, I don't know, like a Star Wars franchise or whatever. So in that sense, it's not really that much different. When you are at the festival, and the streaming platforms, which also represent festivals, you literally write about things that you find inspiring, and they're out there. And there isn't much difference also in the word count or whatever, because if you want to analyze one particular film, you dedicate your energy to it. So it's not even about the word count or about the form, because like, as we know, to make a good short film, it takes most probably, I don't know, cut me short if I'm wrong, but much more skills to compress one very complex story into a short format than to stretch it over 2 hours. So it has all there. I mean, it has all its cinematographic values, like not just script writing, directing, but also like sound department and everything around. So I don't think it's really that much different to write about one thing or the other, or it shouldn't be.
Mm.
And how would you reply to this question, Laura? Your own question?
I also don't. I also wouldn't have expected Marina to tell me that it's a huge difference. I just realized that in the academic context, working on short films, I have to say the experience is quite different. For example, when I'm at, and I mean, you've been in this situation as well, Enrico, maybe you can even also say a few words about this. I just realize how unfamiliar the format is for short film scholars, and how I need so much time usually when, or words when writing an article, to contextualize. Because I cannot assume any kind of familiarity, and because it's always this kind of special case. So I actually, that makes my texts or my presentations, I guess, longer in the end, which is always kind of paradoxical because I'm writing about short film. But this is maybe another topic that we will discuss about later, the whole idea of the canon, which for short film clearly lacks, and which, at least in the academic context, I do experience kind of as a challenge, because I also cannot refer to films that I can just assume everybody has seen, as I can, for example, when I talk to people in the short film industry, when I talk to you guys, like there's just lots of works that I could refer to and then kind of analyze or make a point, and I will assume that you have seen these works because you're in the same kind of industry.
Yeah, you're right. I totally agree. No, Marina, go on, please.
Now, just say that, in a way, I hear you, and I love what you said about how difficult it is to go right and be without references and all that. But I think that sometimes that's exactly the challenge and the beauty of it. You know, when you actually write about a film without having to refer to anything, it's just like presented as like a unique piece of something, you know, that stands alone there. You know, I think it's difference between writing the academic work and also what we do, because you have to go and dig very deep, because like you are an archaeologist of films. In my case, I sometimes have to bite myself on the tongue as like go and say, like, you know, you just stay clear of comparisons. You just go and try to push this thing up, you know, in front as something completely, you know, a long-standing.
Since Laura, you already start briefly talking about the canon, I would now concentrate on that specific question, which is can the concretization of short film canon nurture more public education? Would an established canon help future short film critics? What do you think? Laura, can you start, since I think you are the right person?
Hey, can I just jump in with the previous question before we?
Yeah, sure, definitely.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. So just to mention, I think for future film critics, it's a challenge for them to write about short films. I think they're often lost at what to do, mainly because they're so reliant on narrative. Especially newspaper critics are just writing about, you know, often about the storyline and maybe one or two lines at the end about formal decisions and things like that. Whereas short films is a bit confronting for them, perhaps, because it's often a slice of life or a moment, or, you know, it has a different type of narrative arc or duration to, you know, like a feature film. And they're kind of lost of what to do. They're so used to filling the word count with just plot points that they don't really know how to engage with it and find an entry point. So I think we need to challenge these writers to engage with this kind of cinema and stop doing what they're so used to doing and churning out these film reviews every week. And, you know, there's many ways we can do that. For example, one thing I've noticed is that there's all these kind of young critics programs across different film festivals around the world, which is really wonderful. But I think if you look at how, you know, what the writing, you know, what kind of writing is done in these kind of academies, you see that a lot of them are focusing on feature film. And I think it's good to challenge them early on to say, okay, like now you got to write about short film, you know, good luck. And you can't use reference points to, you know, feature films that everybody knows. Let's see what you come up with. Because it's, yeah, I think that kind of, I think we need to challenge film reviewers to write short film criticism, because they're probably not able to do it. And that's how I think film criticism more broadly can expand beyond such heavy reliance on narrative and plot points and things like that, which is, you know, just one part of many things in cinema.
Thank you, Julian.
Sorry to interrupt. You can move on to the canon question.
It was perfect, actually, you know, because I was thinking that probably it's not the problem only of criticism, short film criticism, but I mean, I'm thinking about also film students in academies where usually they are required to make short films, but mostly they watch feature films and so on. So it's like it's a broader issue, let's say, with short films in general, not only criticism. But I mean, I totally agree with what you said.
And that's also interesting.
Can I jump into that as well? Oh, sorry.
Go on. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, I'll just say, I think in education, short film is a godsend, because, you know, when you ask people to watch a feature film, it requires time. And usually that means outside of the classroom space, right? Unless you organize a screening. Whereas if you use a short film, you can watch it together and engage with it immediately afterwards. I find that in my teaching, short film discussions are way more engaging because everybody's just watched it at the same time. So there's that immediacy, the urgency, And I think it's not because of the format that we don't see short films in education. It's just the lazy teaching, basically. The teachers don't know. They're too reliant on DVD releases, theatrical releases, film reviews in big magazines to construct their history and canon. So they don't know these short films. That's why they're not teaching it. But pedagogically speaking, short films are very useful for teaching in a classroom environment because you can watch it together and engage with it. The other thing is, I think, we say the historical canon doesn't include short film. That might be true for some kind of films, but I'm sorry, but for avant-garde film and experimental film, if anything, feature films are the ones that are missing in the canon. So if you think of, avant-garde films from the 20s and 30s or experimental films in the 60s and 70s, in my teaching, I'm mostly teaching on short films. And that's because the canon works are all short works. And that was because of various things, the context in which they were made. Perhaps short feature films require more budget and kind of system and infrastructure, studio to support them to make these things. And avant-garde films not part of that kind of thing. So, I think it's just from from the perspective you come at it, I think short film is part of the historical canon if you look at avant-garde film. And I certainly think it should be part of education because it gives that opportunity of engagement that maybe feature film struggles to do.
May I also jump in? I think that there is one problem related to this kind of misconception of what short film is. As like, usually, people have this kind of really wrong idea that the short film is just an exercise for a feature film one day. And I think that's something, we really need to discuss more about in the future as well, because, I think that the huge majority of people has this very wrong idea about what short film actually is.
Laura, you were saying something before?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in, and that actually also connects with what you then afterwards said, Julian, about this reliance of film critics basically on, let's say, straightforwardly told narrative films, basically, and then struggling with how short film or how, due to its brevity, that's what I mostly actually work on in my PhD, is the concept of brevity and what you can then do with that. How that changes storytelling, or could change potentially storytelling and experimentation, basically, with cinematic language. Something that I notice frequently is that when I read criticism on short films, it's often by people who do not have a background in cinema or cinema studies, but come more from the art world. And I think that's probably the explanation, because they're just so much more used to this kind of artwork, or this, they don't rely that much on narrative. And that's kind of ties in with what you then later said with the absolutely true fact that at least avant-garde filmmaking is part of the canon, but it's just from my experience, coming from a very classical film studies background, this is still kind of treated differently. It's film, but it's art, and it automatically gets put into this kind of niche or ghetto almost. So on the one hand you have film history, and on the other hand you have art that is also film. And I mean, what I would really love to see in the future is that we find a way to establish a canon that is actually just film, and that does not make this distinction anymore between different forms of approaching the medium. And that would also automatically kind of get rid of this distinction even between, that's what was mentioned before as well. Why do we even have to distinguish between feature film and short film and mid-length and whatever? So I think that all ties in together a little bit.
Thank you. Okay. I will ask you another question now regarding criticism as a mixture of opinion, analysis, and debate. Which one of these three is more important in the context of short films for you? Marina?
Well, I mean, opinion, that's one thing. You know, I observed like a tendency that there are many people right now writing in I form, which for me is something that I immediately skipped on reading, because I don't like this when the film criticism turns into very personal kind of opinion thing. I mean, of course, we all have our opinions about a film, but I think it should be more about debate. You know, but in terms of if you're writing to a broader audience that not necessarily come from the filmic background, you know, then it's more about a very discrete combination of everything without necessarily very much opinions, thoughts about it. It's seriously, you know, as we address all these things, I mean, one thing is to be writing for people who know much about film, and the other thing is to write for everybody, so to speak, without turning it into some kind of commercial salad, you know, some fast food snack. So I don't know if I could really formulate that all well, but I mean, it really depends who are you writing for. So, I mean, we need academia, we need lots of debating, we need like to discuss about films more. I can just, you know, agree with Laura and Julian. On the other hand, if you want to attract new audiences, if you want to make it more accessible to everybody, then you have to write in such language that everybody is capable of understanding, without turning it into something ridiculous and too easy and something you read lately in many online.
Julian? Hello?
Yeah, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, for me, all of it's important because there's not enough of it, but I think I would like to see more debate, as I've been saying, and maybe analysis, because too often I see short films criticism in the form of a festival report, when there's like maybe 3 lines per film or something, where it basically goes down to, this is kind of what it is, it's good or bad, you know? I'm kind of being a bit mean here, maybe a bit reductive, but it's just, you know, I totally understand. I mean, even the fact that it exists, even those 3 lines is very important for me as a short film programmer, for a short filmmaker, and for the festival. But I think we do need to find ways to go beyond that and engage in discussion and debate. And so for me, right now I see a lot of opinion, and that's greatly appreciated. But I really want to see more analysis, more debate. And that means outlets, magazines, or online spaces are providing that platform to engage in short film criticism on that level, and inviting reviewers and film critics to discuss in that level on these short films. So yeah, I think debate would elevate the field of short film criticism to something that we don't quite see at the moment.
Don't you think that analysis is more probably an academic approach?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, and Laura as well.
Not really. I just well, the way I interpret it when you said analysis is just a deeper engagement with the text itself. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I do feel similarly to Laura in that, I mean, when I give presentations and academic conferences and things, I often have to, like Laura, explain a bit more than if I'm talking about, I don't know, Christopher Nolan cinema or something. You know, those things you don't have to introduce to an audience, but with short films you do. But I don't see that as a problem, actually, because I've been, as somebody who researches, experimental film and Asian experimental film, even if I'm giving a conference like paper in a conference about experimental film, I end up having to, give a bit more explanation than those who are presenting on European or American avant-garde film. So, I mean, yeah, I do see it as a problem on the one hand, but I mean, it's just so much part of what I have to do now that, it's just something I have to deal with. And yeah, for us to move on to that, I think it's not so much more criticism about these films, but more visibility and accessibility for these films. And that goes from education to journals and magazines and everything like that. So yeah.
Okay, thank you, Julian. Laura?
I don't really feel like I have much to add to this question, to be honest. What Marina and Julian said, I think basically covers it.
Okay, no problem. I have another question. I also would like to remind the audience that if you want, you can ask questions, and then I can then later on ask them to our guests. So I have a question which is a bit different. In my opinion, many film critics hold selection committee roles in festivals, especially in feature film ones. Apparently, I guess that this is not the case in short film festivals, where critics are less present in committees, while curators or film festival organizers are way more common members. First of all, I would like to know if you agree with this idea, and if so, why do you think this happens? Marina?
I seriously have no idea. Although, as we speak of it, there are actually a couple of film critics who do curate. I mean, you have Carmen Gray, and you have Pamela. But I mean, not many. Yes, you're right. Maybe because programming short films, as I said, in my opinion, is completely different. I mean, competition programs and stuff like that is completely different from the classical big feature competitions. There are many compromises made in this kind of commercial cinema dedicated filmmaking. And I think that, in short film programming, what I experienced from the festivals, there is more dedication to the very explorative, kind of more more carefully curated content, which is braver in a way. That's my opinion. Maybe that's the reason.
Laura, what do you think?
Well, I do have a hypothesis, which might be completely wrong, but it goes a bit back to what I said earlier about this notion that many film critics come from a kind of classical cinema background, and then also are more into the kind of narrative cinema that we are taught usually, or predominantly, I would say. And that even the fact that we use the word curator in so heavily in, or we started using that word in maybe the past, 10, 15 years, kind of shows a proximity, I would say, of the short film sector to the art sector. Because it's clearly a term that we have kind of transferred from museum studies into the film world. And I would say that, as I mentioned before, many of the people writing about short film do have an affinity for the art sector, or even come from that, or also taught in art and not necessarily in cinema. So this is basically my idea why that could be.
Thank you. And Julian?
Yeah, I mean, can you hear me? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so I mean, I think In part, I think the whole idea of critics also being programmers in the current festival landscape is basically a symptom of the situation right now, where I think film festivals and also magazines and outlets aren't paying their staff as much, properly enough to survive on. So people are basically wearing hats, different hats, and partially by choice, but I think mostly by necessity. So I think the kind of hybrid critic programmer has come out of that as well. Saying that, I do think that more exciting kind of curating takes place, at least in my eyes, in short film curating, because for example, when I teach classes on film programming at my university, I really encourage my students to try making a short film compilation program, and this becomes a way to explore the possibilities of film programming. Putting different films together in different ways. We know all the different things that go into short film programming here, but it's not something that you can do as much in feature film programming. Often you're given one slot maybe, and then you fill that with one feature. And as a young or up and coming programmer, you're probably not going to be able to organize a film series at a museum or a cinema institute, but you might be able to convince a independent cinema or a local cinema to present one evening of a short film program. So yeah, I do think for me as a teacher, I engage. Sorry, I'll let that pass. So for me, I think that's what I see as the possibility of short film, that it's quite open and endless. And I see, like Laura said, a lot of people who are more trained in engaging with works that they don't immediately understand. That happens more in, I think, art criticism and writing than perhaps the conventional film reviewing. So yeah, that's the affinity between, like, let's say, as Laura said, the arts and short film programming and short film curating.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I have a question from Niels. Let me check. Okay, this one. One could argue that written criticism is threatened by the blindingly rapid rise of digital media. But for an art form such as the short film that is so embedded into the digital age, could this be or become an advantage? Was it clear, or do I have to read it again? Laura, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say maybe you could read it again.
Okay, so
I didn't
sorry.
get it.
Yeah, sorry. So the question is, one could argue that written criticism is threatened by the blindingly rapid rise of digital media. But for an art form such as the short film, that this is so embedded into the digital age, could this be or become an advantage?
May I maybe start?
Yes, go on.
I think that there was always this kind of outcry every time it came to a certain change in the history of cinema and also in the history of film criticism. There was always an outcry. Oh, there is a crisis of film criticism, and there is a crisis in filmmaking. I think that this kind of rapid digital whatever, with bloggers and many people having their own opinions and thinking they can write about things, is both positive and negative, because we have a much easier access to short films, for instance, and luckily for us, there are not so many people who are writing about short films around in such a careless manner that they're doing about feature films and the rest of the cinema, if you know what I mean. Something that that hits actually in the cinemas, that are shown in big competitions, etc., etc. So this means for the short film criticism just something positive, because first you have to develop the whole concept. You have to track the audience. You have to establish the dialogue with the audience. You have to establish the habit of people reading about short films and watching the short films. So I think that in this sense, this rapid development means something good for the short film criticism.
Yeah, that's what I would have said too, that I see it as a positive sign, in the sense of that I think, criticism, if it's not just work, what Marina mentioned, that in the sense of you have to go review the newest Star Wars movie because you get paid to do so, that doesn't really exist in the short film sector, and I think it shouldn't exist at all in criticism, because I think what good criticism comes from is a kind of dedication to the work and a kind of really sensual and intellectual pleasure that you actually take in engaging with a work of art. So I actually would say that people who take the time to write about, to sit down, watch something and then write about it and putting it online, that could only be positive. And then I still, as an audience, can figure out who are the writers that I would be interested in the long term, and all the others I simply don't have to read, like nobody can make me. So I would say it's a really positive thing.
Julian, do you have an idea?
Yeah, I mean, I basically echo what Marina and Laura have said already, but I think, short film has this adaptability to the online environment that maybe feature film doesn't as much. For example, of course, the best environment, even for a short film, is to, watch it in a cinema with great sound system, good projection, and that concentration, right? But, when I think the reality of moving image media now is that it's, through the digital evolution, we are able to watch films on our iPhone, our iPad, on the way to work, during our lunch break, outside in the park, something like this. But feature film is difficult. Feature film will struggle to hold that attention in those kind of small moments in your life, whereas short film maybe might be able to fill that gap. And I'm speaking at more of a general level, not so much as professionals working in short film or anything like that, but for general audiences, maybe that will become an attractive thing if they're made aware of its existence. I think in part why TV series have become so popular in the last decade plus is because, 50 minutes or even shorter ones, like from, 25 minutes, is just more manageable in this era than a 90-minute plus film. When you read that book, 24/7 by Jonathan Quarry, I think, it talks about how we're basically working all the time, 24/7, as freelancers or just even people working in general offices. There's so little time that you can have for yourself, and maybe short film. Excuse me, keep putting the big wind on my things here. Short film is able to adapt to that new kind of era of our, basically new working life where, people don't have as much time to dedicate to cinema going or cinema viewing even. And also, newspapers have had the excuse that, print is limited and, they can't dedicate an entire page on short films because that would just cost them too much. Whereas online is, it's a different kind of space. It's more malleable. And, I think outlets are able to give that space to short films if they wanted to. So our task, I think, is to encourage them to by, clicking on those reviews that are dealing with short films, or encouraging as festivals. Maybe we can write a co-written letter or something to these outlets, especially tax-funded ones like, Sight and Sound or something, saying you're mostly ignoring a whole space of cinema, and, what so many outlets are doing right now are just still regurgitations of press releases. If you look at IndieWire and things like this, there's a lot of that, and we can push them to say, hey, like, you can contribute to film criticism in a different way. Maybe you can engage with short film and give it the attention that you're able to on the online space when you can't in print. And for example, what was it? Date by Mark Jenkins, right? That was a big kind of sleeper hit in the UK. I'm sorry I keep referring to the UK. I'm half British, and right now I'm reading a lot around there, I guess. But Bait was a indie hit in the UK, and this filmmaker has made many short films, and those perhaps if an outlet like Sight and Sound gave proper attention to short films, they would have seen this rising voice in British cinema, UK cinema, earlier than when a festival picked it up. Was it Berlin Forum, I think, picked it up, and then it had its festival run and theatrical release after. Film criticism is too often reliant on theatrical release and festivals. Like, it should be doing its own research, and they should be held accountable for that. And I think one way of recognizing new voices is, paying attention to short films and filmmakers who don't have the budget and backing of studios or the established production companies. Maybe they'll see the new voices before we all know it already.
Okay. I want to connect this to what is going to be the last question, because we are running out of time, I would say. So it's a practical question, since Julian, you already mentioned some outlets. This is very specific, and it says, what platforms or magazines for short film criticism are there? And also it asks, how are they being funded? Which is also might be also another issue. Well, Marina, would you start? I think you know more than anybody about that.
Oh God. Okay. Well, there are not many outlets out there that are dedicated to short films. Let's be honest. I mean, there were attempts by Kinoscope, and there was like something, in Cineropa previously. There are like Asian Movie Pulse actually is pretty much indiscriminative in that terms, but they would just review anything. If it's manga, if it's short, if it's feature, or whatever, it's a book. I think there are just few of us, literally few. I know that there is one in Belgium, but it's in a language that I don't really understand or read. Of course, Talking Shorts. And what we do is basically not just short films, we also write about documentary films, but it's just shorts and documentaries and experimental films, and we don't actually review any kind of classical feature films. So I don't know, there is a huge gap out there, and I think that people actually do underestimate the general interest in things that are not out there on the market. I mean, also in terms of film criticism. And I'm quite pleasantly surprised by the comments of the readers who want to know where they can get a film. So it's just all these private messages that I get like in my inbox, but it kind of gives me hope that it really does something. It does really, wakes interest, and it does really make people to go and purchase a film, but no, that there isn't much out there. And Julian has addressed, that some shorts are being reviewed also in the daily newspapers, like in The Guardian, but it's just such shorts that are directed by a really big names. It's not like that these newspapers would dedicate their time to a short by a short film director that hasn't made a feature film and is generally known in the public. So I mean, it's lots of work, but it's hard work and it's a hard project, and I'm really happy that we're doing what we're doing. I think it should expand, and it'll be so exciting to have plenty of concurrence, also like the academic reviews and academic texts about short films. I mean, absolutely fabulous. But I think it's slowly going there because, as Julian said, and also Laura, people are really fed up with like particularly very long films. They don't have time for that, but it's like a discovery, not just in terms of we're saving time, but it's something completely new and something completely original, because short films has such a variety of very original works, and like seriously not comparable to anything else you see there. So I think it's slowly moving. Right now we're not many, but I hope we're going to be, at least that the quality is going to be really good. Yeah.
Hopefully so. Laura, do you want to add something on this, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I agree with Marina that it's something's been stirring and going the past 5-10 years. There's a couple of very interesting publications in the academic context that have all been published quite recently, within the past 5 years, I think. So it's slowly getting, kind of highlighting this format of cinema to a kind of wider academic audience, and then also film students, of course. I mean, I think that's really the point of why I think it's so important that we write about short film more, also in the academic context, because that's basically what the future students will read as well, and then they become film critics, etc. I think it's really vital that we start teaching short film more in a academic context. There is a couple of magazines dedicated to short films as well. Bref, I think, is the most established one, but obviously you have to read French to read that. There is one academic journal, a peer-reviewed journal, edited by Richard Raskin, that's out there, that specifically focuses on short films and short film analysis. Just to add to whoever's interested in researching more about short film and short film criticism. That's also a good point to start. Me personally, I quite like to follow the Senses of Cinema reviews on short film festivals as well, which I think is also, again, another topic that we haven't even discussed, that we also don't get a lot of reviews or in-depth analysis of short film programming at festivals, because we don't have the journalists actually visiting. So that maybe just to add, I think probably Julian can also add to the list.
Yeah, Julian?
Yeah, sure. I mean, for example, I just mentioned Sight and Sound, but the section Wide Angle often covers short film, because it's a section where more experimental works are being discussed. For example, Jatovia Gary's The Giverny document has a full-page review by Matthew Barrington in the, I think, previous issue of Sight and Sound. And that's actually available now on YouTube, thanks to the artist. So it's something that you can watch and engage with. CinemaScope always covers short film. I remember an issue that was published last year with the cover film as MS Slavich 7, I think, where, filmmakers like James Ankinitz Wilkins, Rainer Kohlberger, Takashi Makino, these short, people who work mainly in short film, were being discussed at length in the pages of a print magazine there. And then, of course, there's the art outlets such as our forum, our monthly, Art Review, Freeze. These platforms cover artist moving image more broadly, which includes short film. So yeah, and then I also just follow writers basically where they're writing. People from Erica Balson to Matt Turner, Matthew Barrington I mentioned, Eleanor Gorfinkel. I remember seeing this beautiful piece, reading this beautiful piece by Dennis Lim in Film Comment about looking back at the decade, where he mentions, short films have actually, maybe been one of the most exciting developments in recent cinema, in the sense that so many important and interesting films are just happen to be short films. So yeah, fellow writers. And yes, going back to the canon, actually, you know, when you look at Sight and Sound, for example's year-end poll, you know, even the writers that to this, to, you know, take part in this poll often write 10 feature films and then a list of short films that they also like. And I understand that because they want, you know, the feature films they support to go up in the numbers, so they have better visibility and all this. But it'd be great for something like that, to, like Sight and Sound, to ask the writers to at least include one short film or, into their top 10. That would encourage more short film viewing, I think, among feature film critics, and, you know, some other things like maybe film festivals who are providing, you know, hotel nights for film critics. They can say, you know, you can have an extra night with a short film or something like, you know, if you write about a short film or something like this. And maybe short film platforms, such as the ones that have been discussed, could reach out to people who aren't writing about short films more. I often see, you know, the same names writing about short film, and that's understandable, but it'd be great to, you know, reach out to these feature film critics who maybe just don't have the opportunity in the professional context to write about short film, and give them that chance and opportunity. And I think many of them will be up for that challenge. So, you know, I think maybe keeping short film on a separate island can be dangerous in the context of criticism. It'll just be like an echo chamber speaking to the same crowd. And I think together we can find ways to reach the different audiences, readers, critics. Yeah.
Okay. The line, I think, dropped. Or Julian, are you there still?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm still here. It just got loud, and I was kind of at the end, so I muted myself. Sorry.
Okay. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. And first of all, we'd like to thank all our guests today, Marina, Julian, and Laura. Thank you so much for being part of this panel.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks.
And this was
Thank you.
This was Let's Critical, and it was brought to you by Glasgow Short Film Festival and Showways Festival in Poznan. The festivals continue until tomorrow online, and luckily here in Poznan, even in the real world. So I hope you can enjoy the programs. And I would like to remember everybody that you can find this recording of this panel on Talkie Shorts under the Be Sure Now initiative. So thank you so much. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.